our entire way of living and cultural construct was completely changed by psychedelics.
So when we talk about psychedelics, like what are we talking about?
And generally speaking, we're talking about MDMA, psilocybin mushrooms, LSD, ayahuasca, San Pedro, Wachuma, DMT, 5-MeO, and to a lesser degree, ketamine as well. Compounds, medicines, drugs that elicit psychedelic effects. The word psychedelic is relatively new in the English language, in the vernacular. It was only coined in the 1950s by one of the first rounds of psychedelic therapists, a guy named Dr. Humphrey Osmond. And the word means mind manifesting.
Okay, so I'm familiar with, like, I live in Washington. I engage in the things that Washington legally allows. I think I've tried mushrooms when I was much younger. All know the effects of alcohol.
Yeah.
When you talk about psychedelics, what's generally the effect that someone is going for? Like, what are they trying to accomplish when they take them?
For a lot of people, and like the way I grew up, it was really just to have a spiritual, mystical, kind of consciousness expanding, reality bending experience that allows you to pierce the veil and see reality in a different light. But a lot of people these days really come into using psychedelics for mental health reasons, for depression, PTSD, anxiety, and things like that. So what you're going to get out of it is kind of what you put into it in a way. But the general thing, I think, which you can pretty much guarantee is that what you're going to experience is some form of ego dissolution.
Right? Like when you look at alcohol, you kind of, to just put it bluntly, right? Like, I'm going to get fucked up. Right? Is that the same kind of place that people currently are coming to psychedelics for?
Definitely not. On a general level, absolutely not. Of course, there are outliers who do use psychedelics irresponsibly and overuse them recreationally and use them as escapist tools to just get fucked up. But I think for the most part, the vast majority of people who use psychedelics do not use them for that. In large part, that's because if you do use them for that, that's most likely not what's going to happen. If you're looking to escape and just kind of numb your feelings like alcohol does, or what opiates do, or something like that, psychedelics aren't going to do that for you. So it's pretty hard to get fucked up and run around and create chaos, But sure, there are outliers.
Like when I kind of think of psychedelics, right? Like my mind goes back to the 70s, that kind of stuff. How has that, in, let's just say, the average person's mind, like how has psychedelics kind of changed? Where are we at today with them, would you say?
Yeah, look, there's no question that like the American and the introduction to psychedelics in the West, at least on a mass level, really happened in the 60s and 70s, right? Through the counterculture, the hippie movement. And that spawned, a tremendous shift in our culture. Whether you know it or not, whether you feel like, oh, psychedelics aren't for me, these things aren't a good idea, they're dangerous, whatever. Our entire way of living and cultural construct was completely changed by psychedelics. Look at your record collection, look at music, look at pop culture, look at art, look at the civil rights movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, Earth Day, the ecology movement, the sexual revolution. All of these things kind of were spawned from psychedelics. But so when it kind of was introduced on a mass level, it definitely, there was a lot of serious research going on before that in the 50s and early 60s to treat alcoholism, depression. And it was really kind of a response to psychology at the time. And then, of course, the counterculture happened and legitimate psychedelic research kind of went underground. And in the last 20 years, we've seen an incredible resurgence of psychedelic research from very, very credible institutions like Johns Hopkins, NYU, the VA, with the whole MAPS, PTSD, MDMA treatment, and so many others. So psychedelics have come a long way in terms of, sure, they're still used recreationally at, in kind of big subculture things like Burning Man or whatever, things like that. But I think what we're also seeing now is a much larger understanding and acceptance that these are very powerful healing tools as well.
Do you think that it can kind of go mainstream? Because kind of, forgive me for the choice of words, but I'm not smart enough to use other ones in this terms. But it seems to me that it's never about what somebody is doing. It's always about who is doing it. And alcohol is normal because the normal people do it. And marijuana is now normal because the normal people do it. Can psychedelics get to that level? Or is it always going to be like, yeah, but the normal people aren't doing it?
Well, when you say the normal people aren't doing it, I do think that has changed a lot, especially in the last decade. You're hearing a lot more people who you would not think would be psychedelic advocates kind of coming out of the closet and kind of being cheerleaders for psychedelic research, even people who I generally think are, terrible people, like politically, and I couldn't disagree with them more. Yet there they are, stumping for psychedelics, so it's a really weird time that we live in when we see, pretty alt-right conservatives who I think are kind of abhorrent in their normal lives, but, they are out there really stumping for the positive effects of psychedelics as a healing modality. So a lot of bridges have really been kind of mended through this. So, that whole thing about normal people, I think that's starting to kind of go out the window. Can it be mainstream like cannabis and alcohol? I'm not sure. There was recently a RAND study that came out a couple of years ago. It came out a year ago, but the research was from 2 years prior to that. And I think the year was 2022. They estimated that 4.5 million Americans did psychedelic mushrooms that year. That's a pretty big number. But will it have the same mass kind of use potential as some of those other things? Probably not. I do think that there's a finite sort of ceiling, in that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think psychedelics are for everyone. Even I admit that and concede that. They're not for everyone. They're pretty powerful tools, and that's not for everyone.
If, let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, if 5 is over the hump, so to speak, where do you think we kind of are on that scale? And like 10 would be alcohol,
Yeah, I think we're definitely over the hump. I think we're probably in a 6 or 7, and it's a good metaphor. I appreciate that for sure. I'm definitely seeing, I've seen social acceptance and, social acceptability and kind of the kind of general viewpoint on permissibility changed more in the last 7 years-ish than it had in the previous 60 years.
What do you think's the holdup? Are we talking societal or are we talking more legal?
Both. I think the holdup is that so much of what we're seeing in the psychedelic movement right now is a course correction of 60 years of disinformation. There was so much effective propaganda put out in the late 60s and early 70s thanks to the war on drugs. And it takes a long time to course correct.
Would legalization, like if we're talking whatever level of legalization we're talking about,
Yeah.
is that possible? Really possible?
Yeah, my answer on that has changed a lot over the years. It's kind of a strange irony in my life. The older I get and the more involved I am in this community, the less of a zealot I become. Had you asked me 15 years ago, I was definitely one of those guys who was like, hey, let's put acid in the water supply and we're going to make a better world. Woo, And I'm not so sure I feel that way anymore. So, in terms of legalization, what we're kind of seeing now, at least like in Oregon and Colorado, is a very kind of tempered rollout of psychedelic use under the care of or supervision of a therapist or a healer, or you go to a healing center or things like that. It's not quite at the state yet where you can just, walk to the head shop and buy an ounce of shrooms or anything like that. So I think for the next couple decades, in terms of legalization and policy change, it's definitely going to be under the umbrella of psychedelic assisted therapy. Even as things start to become decriminalized, I still think legal use is going to be kind of under those kind of parameters, so to speak. before we see you being able to walk into the head shop where you went and you got the receipt, and also on the shelf is a bag of mushrooms. And that will happen eventually, but it has to go slow.
So can we do this? Can we kind of, I'll name a psychedelic, essentially like, okay, what it does, your experience with it, chance of full legalization or chance of broad legalization. Start with, I guess, the easy one, mushroom.
When we're talking about macrodoses, there's microdoses and macrodoses, two very different things. But when we're talking about macrodoses, which is basically like, a gram and a half or more, somewhere like that, they can expect to have a 4 to 6 hour experience. And the more you do, the more kind of out of your ego, out of your body, and into a place of just observation that you become. So that means if you take 3 grams of mushrooms, it's not like you're going out and going to a party. You are in a very controlled environment, perhaps at your home or with a loved one or with a friend, and you've created kind of a ceremonial special container to have this experience in, so you are safe. And there aren't external distractions, and the music is good, and the setting is good, and your set, which is your mindset, has been looked into ahead of time. So that's basically what you can expect and how you should be using them. High possibility for full legalization. Of all of them, that is the one that has the most chance of widespread legalization.
Ayahuasca.
Ayahuasca is used under the care of a shaman, right? And a shaman who has been initiated into an ayahuasca lineage, like say in Peru or Brazil. Most commonly, the ayahuasca tourism people who go to Peru, they sit with a shaman from the Shipibo tribe. They have been using ayahuasca for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it is really just woven into their culture of ceremonial and sacred use. And that is a very comprehensive and long experience that takes a lot of preparation and a lot of planning, and requires a lot of care and considerations before going into a very, very serious psychedelic. So it will never be legal in the sense that you can just buy it off of the shelf and use it. It could be legal in some circumstances, like what we're seeing in Colorado, where you can go to a healing center and experience it. But that one is not for anybody just to be using on their own.
What kind of an experience is it?
Well, the active psychedelic ingredient in ayahuasca is DMT, and DMT, the tryptamine, dimethylide tryptamine, is the most powerful psychedelic on the planet. Extremely visual, extremely consciousness altering, extremely ego dissolving. So when you go into an ayahuasca state, for the most part, you are visiting another place. Like, Zach and Nick are no longer Zach and Nick. For those 8 to 12 hours, you are taken someplace else. And what that place is, different people have different opinions on that. If you ask the indigenous leaders and elders, they believe that ayahuasca is a disembodied teacher, and they're actually teachers within these plants that are there to show us, that are there to teach us, that are there to heal us. So you are taken to a different place and really observing your consciousness, your life, and your place in the universe in a very, very unique way.
I'm like, do whatever the hell you want to do. Like for me, that's like, nope.
Not for everyone. Not for everyone.
That's I got too many questions about reality as it is. If that makes any sense.
It's a lot. It's a lot,
right? It's a lot.
But I will say though, yes, it's a lot. However, when used with care and preparation, that's also extremely safe. The worst that will happen is you might not enjoy those 8 to 12 hours, but you'll come back from it a different person. It's not like it's going to harm you.
Just talking about some of the most powerful ones, right? Like, can people go down a road where it fundamentally changes them? Like, oh, I'm a different person after doing this.
I'm a different person after doing it. 100%, The person that I was before psychedelics and after psychedelics, and is a completely different person. You know, it completely changed my worldview, changed my relationship to my spirituality, changed my relationship to my ego. Yeah, it is life-changing.
Do you think, though, kind of, I don't know if devil's advocate is the right thing, right? But, like, is it really the psychedelic, or is it the time and the place in the person's life? Like, just to throw this out there, right? Like, would you have had this change if you found Jesus or Buddha or anything like that? Or do you think it's this? It's something about this.
There's no one road to discovering, you know, that awakening. There are many, you know, of course, discovering the Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, whatever it is, you know, those things are very valid paths as well. But I will say this, psychedelics are express routes, you know, they will get you there really quickly. They won't keep you there, but they will take you there. And what you do with it afterwards is kind of up to you.
Ketamine. That's another one I keep hearing a lot about.
Ketamine is legal right now.
It is?
Yeah, not for recreational use, but every major city in America has, you know, you're in Seattle, there's probably a dozen ketamine clinics there, just as there are where I live in Austin, where you could go and sign up for a series of ketamine infusions to treat a variety of mental health conditions under the care of a ketamine-assisted therapist, and you go and have a pretty extensive intake and screening and et cetera, and then, you know, when it's time for your infusion, they take you to a very quiet room, hopefully, and you're under the care of a psychedelic assisted therapy when done right. Anyway, not all ketamine clinics do it right, but those that do, and you get the injection and you have a 45 to 60 minute experience that is pretty powerful. Yeah, so it is legal in a medicinal clinical sense.
Are you ready for some harder / listener submitted questions?
Yeah.
State where you think this is moving forward the fastest. State where there's no chance, like no chance this is happening.
Colorado, moving the fastest. No chance, I don't know about no chance, but very far down the road, the Deep South.
Yeah.
Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, things, places like that.
Your personal favorite? Your least personal favorite?
Mushrooms and MDMA. Certainly LSD is, you know, is really what changed me the most, but these days probably mushrooms and MDMA. My least favorite, ketamine.
I always thought that LSD and acid are the same thing.
They are, same thing.
They are the same thing. Okay, that always threw me off.
Yeah.
But does acid kind of have, like, to me, when I think of acid, I think of the Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And, like, for me, like, that looks awful. Right? Is that a reputation of it, or is like, no, that's not really true?
That's not really true. No. I mean, look at the Summer of Love in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco in 1967. You know, that's acid as well. You know, peace and love and dancing around and loving your neighbor and listening to amazing music and making records like Sgt. Pepper's and completely changing the world. So, no, there's many ends of it.
And MDMA, ecstasy, and Molly, is that all the same thing? Or that, like, it's not the same, but it's...
It is the same thing, but it's a good question, one worth clarifying, because MDMA is a very complicated molecule to make. It's very sophisticated. And because it's so sophisticated, what has been called ecstasy or Molly and made its way into the club scene or the street scene or, you know, high school and college parties, that is not pure MDMA. It's adulterated and poorly made. And that is because the demand cannot keep up with the supply. So there's a lot of bad MDMA out there, and they call it ecstasy or Molly. And a lot of people who have had, you know, Molly experiences, they probably have not had pure MDMA because it's hard to get.
This one is very broad. What's it like being Timothy Leary's son?
It's complicated. It's largely inspiring, largely great. And, he was an amazing teacher and just an extraordinary mind. So, so gifted and so prolific. And he was a great father. The other side of it is, it's hard to grow up with somebody who's that brilliant and that famous. It was not an easy transition for me. Everybody, who thinks that growing up with a famous father of any kind, not just like I did,
Yeah.
they think they have it made, and life is so easy. You've been gifted the world, and I would encourage you to rethink that. It's not the case.
If you were gonna put a date on full legalization, what would your bet be? In enough states that you would say, like the same thing with kind of cannabis, where you would, for the most part, that's pretty much legal.
It is, but still, interestingly enough, cannabis is still a Schedule One drug on a federal level. It's not enforced that way, but the insanity of it is it's still a Schedule One drug, which is the same as meth and cocaine and heroin. So go figure. But on a state level, in enough states, I would say by 2030.
What would you say that you've learned? Like for you, what was the biggest thing that you've learned throughout your experience with psychedelics?
The biggest thing that I've learned is, that's lots of answers there, but the biggest thing that I've learned is how to get in touch with my own voice, with my own expression of who it is that I am. And psychedelics have really helped me to kind of chip away at my insecurities and my thinking that I'm not enough, that I don't have anything to offer the world, and really shown me that I'm, my authentic mind, heart, spirit, that I do have a lot to offer the world, and has really helped to get me in touch with my voice. And I'd say also my connection to spirit. I'm a pretty spiritual person, not super religious or anything, but pretty spiritual, and psychedelics definitely helped me jumpstart my connection to the universal truth, whatever it is that we call God.
You got a new book coming out? Or
Yeah,
came out already? Came out in April?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, it's called Your Extraordinary Mind, Psychedelics in the 21st Century and How to Use Them. I'd say it's 25% autobiographical, 25% prescriptive. And that prescriptive, I mean, there's like question sets and workbooks in there to help people use psychedelics wisely and safely. And then 50% commentary on my decades being in this movement. A lot of the research from the past, but also a lot of the current trends and what we're seeing. So a lot of commentary on that, and kind of plotting the best way forward. But if you're new to psychedelics, I think the book is very friendly for the newcomer, for someone who's just mildly curious. It's not overly technical. It's not overly intellectual. I think it's pretty approachable and accessible.
When you think of, like, when people kind of get into it and they're taking it for a spiritual journey to help with their mental health, what's usually the mistake that they kind of make?
Rushing into it. There has been so much press in the last decade around psychedelics as sort of like this miracle cure for treating PTSD or this miracle cure for depression or anything like that. And a lot of people I notice just read the headlines and are like, oh, wow, I've tried everything else. It's failed. I've tried every other medication. I've tried all these forms of therapy and it's failed and I'm still stuck. And I can just take this and it's just going to cure me. And that is a huge, huge mistake. These things do not cure you. And you are highly advised to take it very slow and be very cautious and really do your homework, especially with mental health. While it can be very successful and the efficacy rates speak for themselves, it's done very cautiously and prudently with the help of experts. So that's the biggest mistake you can do, is rushing into it.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Profoundly Pointless. From society and sexuality to science and sports, every week we explore something new from a side of life you may never have heard of. Subscribe if you're interested. There's a playlist, I think, on the right if you want to see more videos like this. Someday I'm going to finish painting that wall, and just for the record, I'm not orange. I just don't know how to fix this. But Thanks for checking out the show. Would love to hear from you. Okay, I should stop. Stop. There it is.